Hello and welcome to an exploration of anti-racist practices within the fashion industry here in Scandinavia. I'm very pleased to have with me Naima Yassin, 1/3 of a seat at the table.
Yes.
Thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. And thank you to all you for being here. Let's go straight into it. What was the motivation and inspiration for you in getting involved and pushing the debate from a seat at the table towards representation in the Danish and Scandinavian fashion industry?
I think it's a choice for white people to not think about race. So when something as a social movement, social justice movements as Black Lives Matter start, I think it's interesting when an entity as a fashion industry or fashion magazine tries to go into a personal movement without the personality or the personal, without having anything to lose but everything to gain. And we as racialized people, we as a medium, a podcast, a seat at the table, we couldn't just not do anything. So it's really important for us to at least say something because we don't have anything to lose. It's a free podcast that we do on our own. So our opinions are our own, and it was. I don't think it's too soon to ever voice your opinions. Yeah.
And on the subject of representation, which was what you were addressing through a debate and dialogue primarily on social media, what were some of your experiences in that conversation, and what were you hoping to have be the outcome?
Activism can take shape as many forms as racism can. So when you have a platform as social media, and in 2020, I think we're a lot of people that are blessed that we can create our own media platforms where we don't need the established sector. It was a relief to actually just be honest and not think about politics or interest or anything else than that. And we got a lot of feedback, positive feedback, but in our DMs, which was the sad part, that it was still a subject within an industry where you have to save face, where you have all these friends that you have to take care of. And I think that made it even more difficult to be within the space. Yeah, I think that was the experience.
So the experience being that it was still very much behind closed doors and something that wasn't being able to be addressed openly for social media to follow for the public. So if we go back a little bit towards the topic of representation and its importance in the fashion industry, which is why we're here today, what would you say are some of the key points in it being important and why? And how do you, I know we both agree that fashion communicates outward, but how do you feel that it's also a responsibility to hold positions of power accountable for their actions and lack of representation?
I think it's kind of a paradox to talk about diversity and representation within fashion. Just generally, fashion has a lot of problematic areas. It's non-sustainable, it's classist, it's sexist. So there's just a lot of things going on. And just the fact that we're two non-white women having this conversation at Copenhagen Fashion Week, I think that's an exception and not the rule. So let's just start there and just state that this is odd. This is not normal. And I think that the stories that the media tells, if you are born to you die, are told from the whole world that people that look like you and you do not matter because you're not in the media, you're not on front pages, you don't have the CEO positions. You tend to actually believe that. So representation is really, really important, and it's not just about race or gender, it's about showing the world that you're catering to. And if you do not have that representation within, and not just on the surface, I think that you as an employee might actually lose sense of your customers because you don't see them on a daily life. So representation both on a cover of a magazine, but also the photographer and the designers and the stylists and the makeup artists. I think that you have to look at the whole supply chain if we have to be real and have to make these drastic change.
Yeah, and you're mentioning it already. We're operating within a structure that isn't intended for us, effectively, and it also has this very huge background and history of exclusivity. And so talking about your experiences also, you're mentioning how even the communication was exclusive and hidden and secretive. What were some of the other structures that you came across through this dialogue in holding a publication accountable towards, with regards to representation? What were some of the other structures that you noticed? You were mentioning them already, just how the corporations are built up.
I think if we try to take up the good examples, like a good representation is not when you go to Kenya and visit a Maasai village and take their national clothes and then sell it as a high price the next season. Representation is not having a black or brown model on the front page, but you don't have any brown or black editors. I think good representation is when it's through the whole layers. And I think it was very difficult for us to get that point through because we were always met with, but people don't apply for the jobs. They're not out there. We don't know them. They don't come up to us. But it always comes back to, you can't be what you can't see. So why would you apply for a job in a company where people don't look like you? Because that company actually tells you that you're not welcome. So I think it always goes back to, how do you scout talent? We live in a world of social media. If you want to find a diverse customer, diverse model, a diverse editor, just look at the social media platforms. We're all curating everything that we're good at. And you don't need an old-fashioned CV and cover letter. Fuck that, just go on social media and see whoever you want to represent and bring them in and give them a seat at the table, because I think there's a lot of us creating our own tables and creating our own doors. So it's 2020 and we still have sentences that is, she is, or he is, or they are the first black anything. I think that's horrible, and it's not something that we should celebrate. We should have been much further in 2020, but maybe at some point we don't even have to wait for the established industry. Sorry to say.
Yeah, no, definitely. Going back to taking this on and communicating with fashion media, both of us agree that the fashion industry is constantly communicating outwards. So whether we work in fashion or not, we are constantly in a dialogue with these narratives. And aside from the narratives that you've mentioned, were there other elements of the discourse of communication that surprised you, or was it very much what you expected to hear?
I think I wasn't surprised. I was not mad. I think I was just disappointed that we're not even that far. I think I'm sad that we have magazines that actually still say that if you put a black or brown model on the front page, that magazine won't sell as much as the neutral white women on the front page. I think it's sad that you still look at the covers. Who shot them? It's a white photographer. Who dressed the model? It's a white designer. They talk about Danish designs, Scandinavian designs, but they're all white. So when do we have this conversation? When do we allow to have these hurtful situations as well, to develop the language to talk about them, where we all understand? I think on a broader sense, I think it's magnificent that we as human beings actually do understand each other, because we share a language, but that language also is very narrowing and exclusive for a lot of people. So when we talk about the fashion industry, I think for me, and well-educated, I have a job, I pay tax. I don't think the fashion industry in Scandinavia is going to represent me. And I think that's sad, because I can pay that 75 kroner for a magazine, but I don't want to.
What were you hoping the outcome, or what was the seat at the table hoping the outcome would be from this initiative to start a debate?
It wasn't even to start a debate because it's not up for discussion. I was hoping that people would actually just sit down and listen and say, sorry, we didn't know this, we didn't know this. Which brings me back to my first remark saying it's a choice for you to not think about race. So I'm sad that people are still not listening, that it's still a debate about whether racism still exists or whether diversity is well done because in 12 years you had 1 or 2 black models on the front page. I'm like, are we, like, do you need your ally cookie for that? I'm not sure. So I was hoping that people would just sit down and listen because there's a lot of us that do it on our free time, but there's also a lot of us, especially in this room, that actually do this for a living. So you don't have to give out your knowledge for free, and if you want knowledge, go out and pay for it, because there's a lot of consultants, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of books being made in 2020. So I don't see the problem to not be more educated.
There's a lot of comments about this being the era where we can change the course or the rhetoric of a CEO, or even maybe shift their position with a single tweet. Do you feel empowered by the opportunities that social media gives us to also hold corporations and publications accountable?
I think there's 2 things. We do still operate in a field made by white men, so it still has its limits of how much I can actually say on social media without getting shadow banned. But it makes that I don't need a journalist to come and contact me to get my message across. When we do our podcast, we rarely say yes to interviews because we have our own platform. We don't need anyone else to come and invite us to talk about it because we just created the way to talk about it. So maybe, but we still, I think I keep coming back to fashion being the place where you can make these bold statements, where social justice movement started, where people can make these political statements. And it just haven't been done in Denmark. We see the September issue in the UK with 18 activists from the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's Vogue Global. I think that's a huge reach that we can't do on our own. I think we all still need to work together. We all need each other, and it frightens me and it saddens me and it makes me angry, but at the same time, it's the only way that we can actually make a change.
We're about to wrap up, but I'd love to just elaborate a little bit more about change making and some concrete things that you've noticed in your experiences that you think could be put into effect immediately that would have tangible effect on the industry.
Change all the CEOs. I'm sorry, but change has to start from the top, and you need people that are diverse, that actually gets paid to do the work. And if you start from the top, then it has to make a change throughout the whole system. You can't start from the outside world. Like the front page, good for you, but if it's still white inside, if all the people that still get the money are still white, then there's no change in it. So change all the CEOs and see what happens. That's the idea.
Thank you so much, Naima Yassin, of A Seat at the Table. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's it.